This is Tell Your Story Alaska. We talk aviation, history, theology, but most of all, the raw stories of Alaskans and the gospel. All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of Tell Your Story Alaska. Today I am with my good friend Jeff Kirsch. Jeff and I have been flying together for, I don't know, was it 2 or 3 summers?
At least, yeah.
At least. We've known each other for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, when we first got to Alaska, Jeff was the guy who took me and my family, and we lived at your house at this spare cabin. So Jeff and his family are very special to us, and some of the most kind of really neat flying stories that I do have, a lot of those are with Jeff. So today's going to be fun because we're going to be telling our flying with the wildfires story. Last year we had some pretty crazy fires in Alaska, and we were flying all around them, and so we're going to talk about that today. But first, my friend Jeff is the founder of an organization called Soaring for Christ. So tell us, when did you found it, why, and what does Soaring for Christ do?
Yeah, so we founded it a few years ago now, and the purpose of Soaring for Christ is to fly the gospel. We do that by supporting Christian ministries. We fly staff and different students. We predominantly support Bible camps. We're also very passionate about making disciples. And currently, the way we do that is just by supporting other ministries that have an emphasis on making disciples. And then we also do some pilot training. So we've done some primary flight instruction and some biannual flight reviews, that sort of thing. But in the future, we're hoping we can combine a little bit of the flight training with discipleship, but we'll see where the Lord leads there. Yeah,
we did talk about that. Yeah, we need to talk more about that, and we will. Yeah, you actually gave me my last biannual flight review. So yeah, that's really, really helpful. Because you recently, a year or two ago, mm-hmm. you went and got your instructor's license for that purpose.
Yeah.
To give me a biannual flight.
Exactly. That was the main purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was in 2020.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. So today we're going to talk about the fires in Alaska during the summer of 2022. Now, every summer, Jeff and I, we have 2 Cherokee 6s that we primarily use. One's a 260 horse and the other one's a 300 horsepower. And you always give me a hard time because I fly the 300 horsepower and you fly the one with less power, which you always give me a hard time about that I have the higher powered one. And
yeah, well, I have to follow you, and it's hard to keep up at times.
Yeah, I have to cruise at like 55%, and you're up at like 75%.
Now, I did get some, payback when I flew we were kind of flying in formation, and Billy was in his maul. And so I had to have a throttle basically at idle for him to keep up.
That's true. But I could land on a sandbar, and your Cherokee could not.
True statement. And if it could land, it couldn't get back off again.
Yeah. Well, and of course that's true in aviation. Everything's compromised. You want to fly fast, you need a lot of runway. If you want to fly slow, well, you don't want to fly slow, but if you're going to fly slow, you can take off on a dime, which is really nice. So those are the compromises. Everything in aviation is compromised, right?
Definitely.
Yes, it's the unfortunate world that we live in. Okay, so let's talk about the fires of 2022. I did look up some statistics on this. In 2022, in the summer, there were 269 fires burning across the state. Now, that was at one time. I think total there's like 305 fires. But at one time, at the height of the fires, there's 269 fires burning across the state. It burned 3.08 million acres of land. My house is on 1 acre, so 3.08 million acres of land. And I actually did the math. It's something like 0.001% of Alaska, just to pinpoint again how big Alaska is. It's really big. But 2022 was the 7th most fires ever recorded in Alaska's history. It was the 7th worst summer of fires. And of course, that's what we had the privilege to fly through. The prominent fires that we dealt with were the Sunset Fire, the Clear Fire, and the Chitanana Fire, but we're going to get to those in a little bit. So let's start with, Jeff, will you explain at the time what camp we were flying for and what is like the flight schedule typically look like?
Yeah, so at the time we were flying for Kokrine Hills Bible Camp, which is located on the Yukon River. It's about 120 miles west of the closest road. And normally we fly, for every camp, we fly staff in, students in, so 2 to 3 days of flying. And at the end of the camp, we'll change over what students are there, and then we'll fly in a different group of staff.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a staff day and then a camper day.
Yeah.
Right. So which do you prefer? Do you like flying the staff or the campers better?
I kind of like flying the campers because we fly to more different locations, and then also just kind of, I think it's, I don't know, I'm not the best conversationalist, but I like after camp, it's pretty easy. I just ask the kids, what did you learn this week? What did you get out of camp? Yeah. And I just like to hear what they have to say, and just how the Lord, has worked in their life. And, I had one student a couple of years ago told me, I learned about prayer this week. And he shared some verse from Isaiah, and I was just like, that's not what I was expecting, but that's encouraging. He was probably 13. Okay, be my guess. Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, the kids we fly range. Like each week is a different age group. So we start with high school, and then we work our way down to elementary. And so I know one of the challenges we have is like high school week. You got these big kids. And our weight and balances, we have to be so careful because like the planes are taking off close to gross all the time. Then when we get down to elementary camp, it's like nothing. These feathers are climbing into the plane. And
yeah, it's not really fair. With the high schoolers, I'm giving them a hard time. Like, you cannot bring that bag. The weight limit is 30 pounds. You need to leave, your 2-liter bottle of Coca-Cola here. But yeah,
leave your rock collection at home. Yeah. You don't need that for camp.
Once we get the elementary campers, I'm like, I don't care. There's no way we're gonna get up to gross.
Yes. So we have fun doing weight and balance, and the worst part is asking the teenage girls how much they weigh. That's always awkward, and sometimes we have to make some judgment calls. And I don't want to say too much about that, but
we'll leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Oh, tell us about, you talked about, we always start the summer by flying from the Matsu Valley in the Big Lake area up to Nenana, Alaska, because we base out of Nenana. Now, you were telling me before we started recording about that flight from Big Lake to Nenana in 2022. Tell me about that flight. This is how our summer started.
Yeah, so, I checked the weather as I normally do, beautiful blue skies, and took off from Big Lake heading up there. And at the time, there wasn't that many fires north of the Alaskan range, but there was a lot out west, out more near Bethel, if people are familiar with Alaska. And anyways, but believe it or not, that smoke was making its way into the mountain range, and as I was flying through there, it was just, the visibility was a little disconcerting. And so I decided, I'm going to climb and climb and climb. And by the time I finally got to blue skies, I was up at like 12,000 feet. But the crazy thing was, at 12,000 feet, I could see all the way to the ground.
That's so. We're going to talk about that a little later, but yeah.
So, anyways, it was just a little more challenging than I was expecting. Supposed to be a blue sky day, and so
yeah. So, first flight, just transporting the airplane up north where we're going to be using it. Like it was like wow, might be a rough summer because the smoke is already coming in, and so we started the summer with smoke's already there. Yeah, I remember doing those first staff flights. We always start with staff, and we fly between Nenana and camp, which is about a 1 hour flight one way. And so the staff flights is just this straight shot, Nenana to camp and back, Nenana camp and back. And I remember there was that fire. I think it was the Chitanana. Is that the one we were talking about? That's the fire where we started flying the first team in, seeing this fire. It started small, and every time we did a round trip, the fire grew a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. I mean, the flight was like directly on the route of flight. So it wasn't like we were going out of our way to see this fire. It was, if we flew straight, we would fly directly over the epicenter of the fire.
Yeah, and it was like this, and we were just looking at pictures of it a few minutes ago. These big white plumes of smoke going up. And so, like you said, it was directly on our path, so we had to like circle around it. And our deviations got bigger and bigger on after every flight because this thing was growing and growing. But fortunately, at least, it was blowing away from camp the way the wind was going. And so we weren't really concerned about the fire, except that the smoke was just covering more and more area. It was harder to fly around it. We were able to get everyone in, and we did all the flying all the kids to camp, and I don't remember having any issues. Do you?
No, it was
standard.
Yeah, I mean, like Billy was sharing, there was that one very large fire we were diverting around in the afternoons, but pretty much, I mean, the visibility was beautiful, I would say.
Yeah. At least, like, it was standard flying with what we're used to in the summers.
Right. Yeah.
Beautiful and perfectly clear, especially flying to Buckland. There's always some visibility challenges. Okay, so then around the second week of camp, there was about 100 people at camp, and that's when a fire broke out. A fire broke out just 3 miles east of camp, and this was called the Sunset Fire, and it was labeled Fire Number 369, and that's how it looked on the website. And it covered about 480 acres 3 miles east of camp. So obviously, the camp's an extremely remote location on the Yukon River, and when a fire breaks out that close to camp, and the camp is full of children and staff. Well, this was a high school week, so it was high schoolers and then staff, and there was a couple of young families at the camp too, including mine with the young children. Of course, a fire breaking out that close is kind of concerning. Now, at the time, me and my family were staying at the camp, and you and your family were back at Nenana, kind of our base, right? And so we were apart. And I just remember waking up one morning, and there was just incredibly thick smoke. But it was actually kind of a pleasant smell. It smelled like we were having a campfire because it's burning spruce. It smells great. After it's smelling like that all day, it starts burning your lungs a little bit, and it gets uncomfortable. So I do remember that's kind of how like the drama of it started, is waking up and the sky was kind of reddish, and you can smell it, and you can see the smoke visibly thick. And so it was I think it was that same day that there's an organization called the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, flew a helicopter in. It flew over the camp, and then it hovered over the airstrip where we were landing. And it landed there, and all these men hopped out. And I'm like, what is happening? I didn't even know they were going to come. So these men hopped out, and they had gear, and it was like, I can tell they're obviously like firemen, but they were what we would call smoke jumpers, where they literally jump out of planes into the fire areas to deal with the fires. But in this case, they're able to just top out. It was a little bit less cool. But anyway, BLM came, and I remember riding the four-wheeler up to the airstrip to talk to them, and I talked to the leader there, and he was asking me questions like how many people are at camp, and do you have a plan to get out of here if you need to? And so we talked through that, and basically we had a couple of boats that we were able, one of them had some issues, but they got it working. With the two boats, we can get about 40 people out at a time by the river, but we also had the Cherokee 6, and I was the pilot, and that's all we had. So really about 100 people at camp. What we had, we were not able to get people out super quickly, but fortunately, like, the fire was not a direct threat yet. It was 3 miles away, and the wind was blowing the other way. And so we were able to, there is internet out there, like a satellite internet system, so we were able to keep an eye on the weather systems, which we did, and the forecast was showing for the next 10 or 12 days favorable winds. So the wind's blowing the fire away from camp. And so that kind of gave us a peace of mind. But the BLM guys also had like drones and they had helicopters and they also had like cargo planes that were flying over. And I had some videos of this on my phone. Cargo plane would fly over and like drop these like parachute supply things, and it would be these crates full of fire hoses and pumps. And
so yeah, I actually hadn't heard about this until
you didn't?
No. And so how many drops did they do from these cargo planes?
Oh man, if I went back and reviewed my videos, I could probably tell you, but I would say they probably did about 5 passes.
Okay.
Like the plane would pass and do a drop, and it was kind of cool to watch because they have it down to a science. The package would swing out, the shoe would open, and it would swing back and forth, and the swing made it move across the sky, but they knew exactly how it would fall, so it landed right in the middle of the runway every time. It was very impressive. I have some videos of it. I'll show it to you.
And then, the other question I had was, remind me and everyone who's listening, how many smoke jumpers were there?
I think there was about 12.
Okay.
About 12. I don't remember counting, but I'd say there was a dozen there. Okay. And the numbers changed throughout the week. Like, as the fire was dissipating, like later in the story, like some of them left, and there was down to just maybe like 4 or 5 guys.
Okay.
So, but what they had done with all these supplies that were dropped, they were doing a lot of analysis with drones and stuff, and then they were analyzing the camp. So I gave the guy a tour around the camp. He saw that there was a creek running through it, and that there's actually Kokrine Hills has a, what do you call it? You just cut out a line of trees. It's like a fire wall. I think they call it a firewall, something like that. But it's where you cut out a line of trees from the rest of the forest that surrounds the camp. And the idea is a protectant for a coming fire. And so Kokrine Hills has this. A fire break. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah. Kokrine does have a fire break. So what these guys did is they lined up all of these hoses along that fire break and then in and around the buildings of the camp. They had all these hoses laid out across camp. And they had these pumps ready to go that were down in the creek. And we had our diesel generator on. So, like, if the fire did shift and move our way, they were telling me that it's actually surprising how much these hoses can fend the fire off. Like, it's impressive. So,
yeah, I was surprised to hear one of the other pilots was sharing how a friend of his had a little cabin out in the middle of nowhere. He set up some pumps and sprinklers and turned them on, and a forest fire raged through, and there's a perfect, like, almost like a dome. It looked like a perfect circle around the cabin. It didn't burn anything because I guess I didn't know this, but if you raise the humidity level just slightly in the air, it'll actually prevent the fire from penetrating the air.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, certainly these BLM guys understood the science of all this, and they knew where to put these. It was really neat just kind of hanging out with them and talking to them. They knew, obviously, a lot about fires. You have to if you're going to be a smoke jumper. Anyway, it was pretty cool watching them, but then I remember meeting with there's 2 camp directors, Roger and Joey, and we went into Roger's house and we sat down. We're like, what are we going to do, guys? We knew what we had to get out of the camp. The winds were in our favor. We also have all these hoses and this whole system set up. And so getting out is challenging because I can't just fly everyone. I can't fly 100 people out with one airplane. But we did have the boats as well. But, is boating people to another town even better? Because there's fires everywhere. So it's like, what should we do? And the other issue was the camp does have a fire evacuation plan. And the plan is to boat the campers and the staff out to a sandbar that's out on the Yukon River. And so that sandbar is pretty much always there. But this year, the water level was higher and the sandbar was gone. And so their fire evacuation plan became, not really doable. And so that kind of added to the stress. And so the only other option would be to, boat the kids to the other side of the river and just kind of hang out in the woods. But the problem with that is that the woods can get so thick with mosquitoes, it would be difficult to choose between dying by mosquito bite or by fire. And so anyway, we sat down and we had to decide what we were going to do. And as it turned out, the BLM guys told us that they actually don't have the authority to tell us to leave. As a government agency, they said they didn't have that authority. They can just make like strong recommendations, you know. And so they didn't even like make an official recommendation to us to leave, but they were just updating us on the fire.
Well, I guess one thing I didn't realize until we flew over later, and this is after the fire had died down some, was, and I think this probably went into, you know, some of the decision making, was there is actually some marsh between where the camp is and where the fire was burning.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was only 3 miles away, but so they did have some water, you know, some wetter soil to cross, which was kind of a little bit of a barrier as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember at the end of that conversation, we decided to continue camp as planned. But we did decide as soon as there was a chance to fly the young families with little children out. And that was including my family. And so we called our friend Adam, and it was a clearer day. Like it was VMC conditions that day. In most days it wasn't, but this day it cleared up a little bit. And so Adam was able to fly his 206 in and land. And when he arrived, I asked him, so how was the route? You know, how was the conditions over? And I remember all he did was look at me and say, how are you on the instruments? I thought, oh, great. And I said, I'm fine on the instruments. I'm comfortable flying instruments. So he said, okay, I hope so, because you're going to need them. So anyway, we loaded up my family into the Cherokee 6 and the other family that was at camp into his 206, and we flew together back to Nenana. And I remember that flight because we decided to stay lower so we can see the ground clearly, because being able to, even though you don't have a horizon, even just seeing the ground lets you know that which way is down. And so it does help a little bit with the orientation with flying a little lower. We also have ForeFlight, which has this terrain hazard feature, which is so nice. So you turn that on, and then it also tells you where other traffic is on the ForeFlight. And we were able to see another jumper plane where that was dropping smoke jumpers on one of the fires. And so we had to like deviate around that. I think they require like a 10-mile radius. So we had to we were on the radio with them. We were flying around them. So anyway, we made it back to Nenana, but one of the challenges with Nenana, and I thought you would want to talk about this, is the RNAV for runway 4 approach.
Yeah, so actually we had a similar situation a few years back, and actually 4 years, or no, a few years, 3 years.
Back in 2019, yeah. Right?
And at that time, we were actually the fires were more based around the Fairbanks area, and early in the morning, the smoke layer was maybe 2,000 feet thick, and so we would normally just take off and climb up through it and get on top, and then the only challenging thing was later in the day as the fires would heat up and put more smoke into the air. I remember taking off and climbing up to 9,000 feet, and weren't above the smoke yet. And I was just like, well, we're just going to fly the rest of the way there because it's not that far of a flight. Right. But at that time, we had the IFR approach into Nenana. But this year, there was actually another forest fire called the Clear Fire. And because they were fighting that fire, they actually had a temporary flight restriction, which we can't fly into around the fire, and that cut off the whole approach. Right. So, it's lower visibility. You'd like to use the approach. It's not available. And There's only one approach in Nenana because on the other side of the runway, there's actually a hill 1,700 feet high. And so that was the only option we had for an IFR approach.
Right. So we didn't have the option of flying IFR into Nenana. Right. So I remember flying in there, and Adam was saying when he left Nenana, it was still VMC conditions. But when we picked up our passengers and flying back to Nenana, it had gotten a little worse. It was still VMC, but it would have been nice to be able to fly that approach, but we couldn't because of the clear fire, and there's a TFR there, so cutting off our approach. So it's just kind of like, I don't know, all these like little factors that you're supposed to have these approaches available to you, and then there's like these unforeseen circumstances that takes this away, and it adds stress.
Yeah, I mean, for pilots are always doing risk management, so It was very, it's kind of uncomfortable to, okay, if I take off from here, am I even going to be able to come back in and land if I need to? Right. So not having an approach, it makes it a lot more challenging, and so probably like back in 2019, some of these days we would have made the decision to go because we had the option. Here, we decided to stay on the ground more than we did, without that.
Yeah, I would say we were pretty conservative in all of our decision makings. I mean, we're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was able to fly my family, Adam, the other family, into Nenana, and fortunately for us, there was a guest house there. The other family, I think, went up to Fairbanks and stayed somewhere, and so my wife and I and kids, and then Jeff's family was already in Nenana, and so we spent like a whole week in Nenana just monitoring the fire, and it was an interesting week because there was an uncertainty about whether camp was going to continue. There were still 100, well, I guess a little less than 100 now because we flew a few people out. People at camp, and they were still continuing the camp as normal, and the BLM guys were still out there monitoring, and so it was kind of like, do we go home? Like, what do we do? I mean, I got to make sure all these campers get home safe. So it was just a week of just like this uncertainty of how things were going to go. It was during that week, well, for one thing, we kind of enjoyed our time in Nenana. They had a 4th of July celebration. Remember those silly races we did?
Yeah, I actually raced a state trooper on a tricycle.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Did you win?
Well, I think I won against him, but it was a relay. So
I see.
When Jonathan, my son, jumped on, he didn't. His legs were a little too long
for the tricycle.
Yeah. So overall, the state trooper came out on top.
And I remember your son Jonathan did the potato sack race.
Yeah.
And he was insanely fast. He won. Like, if you win, the race is like you run like 50 yards or something. Yeah. And he won. You win like a quarter if you win or something.
No. If you win, it was $1, Billy.
Oh, okay.
Come on, let's get the facts straight here. And if you came in, I think second, I don't know, at least second place, you got a quarter. So.
There you go.
But I think he came away with at least $5.
I think he won a lot. He's pretty fast. So the week was just kind of enjoying Nenana. I remember we went to the park a lot, but I remember the sky was literally red sometimes, and you look up and the sun just looked like this red ball in the air because of all the smoke. It was really creepy looking. It was very apocalyptic looking,
Yeah, and I mean, so, Billy's family got flown out of camp to Nenana, but there was even there was a fire threatening, the area, the clear fire. Right. Not that close. They were in but it was still a very large fire, and couldn't really get away from the smoke. Me and my family actually tried to go to get away from the smoke and go to Fairbanks, not realizing that Fairbanks is a bowl and collects the smoke, so it was even worse up there.
Right. Yeah, and also during that week, you and I drove up to Fairbanks. Mm-hmm. That was during that week, right? We went up to Fairbanks together, and we hopped on a simulator that we paid to get some simulator time. And the idea was to prepare ourselves for possible IFR flights. So I thought that was a really good move on your part to, look that up. You found the simulator, and we went there. And we paid for 1 hour of instruction, I think, with an instructor.
Yeah.
He sat with us for an hour.
And then we spent at least an hour or two more after he left.
Yeah, he left.
Flying more approaches.
And we flew approaches in all kinds of different villages.
Yeah, Tanana, Ruby, Huslia, Buckland.
Yeah. And that was nice because it's loggable time, and it's a lot cheaper than flying in airplanes.
Yes.
That made it really nice. So we got ourselves kind of freshened up on IFR stuff, and that became useful because in the end, the camp directors did decide to cancel camp for the rest of the summer. We should not bring more people into this potentially hazardous situation, even though we're continuing with the camp we have, but after this, they decided to cancel. But even though they canceled, we still had the challenge of getting everybody home. And so it was a lot of discussion, but one resource we had was, Franklin Graham's organization, Samaritan's Purse. The camp director Roger has a really good relationship with Samaritan's Purse, and so he called them up, and they have a program for emergencies, and I guess this qualified in their mind as an emergency to get these kids out of camp. So what they decided to do was to put the campers on the boats, and they boated them upriver. I think it's 60 miles to Tanana by the way the crow flies, or we should say by the way the plane flies. And they boated them upriver to Tanana, and then from Tanana, the Samaritan's Purse aircraft, I think they have caravans, is that right?
They actually had. I can't remember the name of the airplane, to be honest. Yeah, it's actually larger than a caravan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember.
But they had. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 aircraft, relatively large in comparison to our Cherokees supporting.
Right. So our Cherokees fly 6 people, but when you get the pilot in there, that's 5 passengers.
Yeah, and I think they had one that was at least a 20 passenger.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was really nice because the Samaritan's Purse airplanes, even though you and I are qualified to fly the approaches into Tanana with our aircraft, it was nice with the Samaritan's Purse because they have better instruments. They also have, and you were saying this, that you believe that they fly dual pilot. So you have 2 people handling the IFR workload rather than 1, which would have been our case. And they can carry more people per flight. So you reduce the number of flights.
Yeah, you don't have passengers standing around at the airport for, over 10 hours waiting for a flight. Yeah,
when you have, just under 100 people to get home and you only have a 6-passenger plane, it's nice to have a 20-passenger plane. So Samaritan's Purse was able to fly into Tanana and fly most of the campers home. However, not all of them. There were a few passengers left. Some of them were campers left. Some of them were going to end up going to Anchorage. And so they were just going to hop on the leftover flights back to Nenana with us and drive to Anchorage with someone. It wasn't us, but it ended up being someone else. And then there was some still from Buckland and then some from Kobuk. And it was like one from Kobuk and one from Shungnak. It was something like that. So anyway, you and I decided we were going to do dual because we realized we were going to have to file IFR for this flight. So from Nenana, oh, by the way, we forgot to mention this. When we went to that, do the simulator time, we also went to the movie theater and saw Top Gun.
Yeah.
Remember this? And so after watching that movie, we were all like pumped up and ready to do the craziest flights. Like, whatever, just get me in a plane. Not really, but
no. I was telling Billy before we started recording. We actually went and seen it again, and one of our friends that was with us, there was a bunch of pilots that was at the viewing as well, and she said, "Whatever you do, no one's allowed to go flying today. You guys are way too excited."
Yeah, I remember we were saying like, "Don't go below the floor deck" or whatever the term was. Yeah, so we had fun joking about being idiots, basically. Yeah. So anyway, despite having just watched Top Gun, we decided to file IFR and fly dual and to share the IFR workload. And so we decided to fly the 300 horsepower white Cherokee. That one has an autopilot, which makes it really nice. Even though some of the instruments are better in your Cherokee, the 260, but we opted for the white one. Anyway, so we decided to fly dual, and we filed, and we took off from Nenana, and I remember just taking off, and it was immediate IMC conditions.
Yeah, it was. We had to follow a departure procedure, so I don't remember it exactly, but you take off, climb to a certain altitude, and then you have to do like a climbing turn, and then you have to fly to the VOR and then hold over the VOR while you climb.
And I remember the reason there's like a loop is because it takes you over that hill.
Yeah.
And the hill is 1,700 feet, so they want to give you climb time. But I remember being creeped out because it was IMC. I had no horizon, but I do remember you can sort of make out an outline of a hill. I'm like, are we above that? And we had to like just trust the numbers, and you
you really got to rely on your instruments because it is deceptive, and in the smoke, it can be difficult.
Yeah. So I remember ATC had us climb up to 9,000 feet, and it was right around 9,000 we popped out above the clouds, and it was kind of nice once you're above them because then it's just sunny and blue and beautiful and clear. But I do remember being able to look down and see the Yukon River, like through the smoke. And this is a good time to talk about the smoke issue. Like, can you explain why smoke is deceptive?
Yeah, your vertical. I mean, how far you can see or like up and down.
Right.
You can see a lot further than you can see horizontal. And then the other, I think you researched this. I mean. A lot of times as pilots, we depend on these automated weather reporting systems.
Right.
And they don't actually pick up on the smoke. So they'll report better weather visibility than with the naked eye.
Right.
And I even noticed, you're flying along, I'd look and it's like, that mountain's obscured, but you take a picture of it. Even your camera has a way of cutting through it a little better than the naked eye.
I've noticed that too. Yeah.
But something else a couple resources we found while flying this summer. Adam, who's the other missionary pilot that flies a lot for Kokrine, he shared with us there's this website that predicts smoke.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of neat. I didn't know there was I knew, obviously I'm familiar with weather reporting, but it's actually a smoke forecast.
Yeah, I wrote it down. It's here. It's
smoke.alaska.edu. And I think it's an experimental thing. They put a disclaimer on it, but it actually was very helpful, for seeing which days would be good days. And so we use that kind of as our first line of decision making. And then the other thing was weather cams. At FA weather cams they have at the airports were very helpful because, why don't you explain that?
Yeah, I love the weather cams because they give you a clear day image. So it's not like a live camera. It takes a picture every 10 minutes or something. But it gives you a clear day image as an example. And it's helpful because in the clear day image, it'll show you a hill in the background and how far away that hill is. And so in the image, when you take a picture of the live image, if you can or can't see that hill, which you know how far away it is, it gives you a solid indication of what the visibility is, whether it's smoke or clouds. So we found that the webcams are the absolute best source of information for weather.
Yeah, especially in smoky conditions. But even on a cloudy day, it might be if there's a weather system that is right at the airport, it might be poor visibility on one side of the runway and beautiful on the other side. Especially near the ocean,
right on the edge of something. Yeah. So those weather cameras are just totally, really the best. Okay, so I remember when we filed. Now the camp is just this remote airstrip. There's no approach there, so you can't just file IFR to the camp. So in order to get around that, we filed to the nearby town of Ruby. And so we took off to that weird departure procedure, got up to 9,000. We went straight towards Ruby. And I remember as we we had to pass camp to get to Ruby. And we descended down into Ruby and it really cleared up. The weather cleared up and the smoke was kind of gone. It was just really nice. But we were in touch with the people at camp, and they were telling us the conditions looked good. So that was hopeful, even though the Nana was totally smoked in. So anyway, we flew the approach into Ruby, and we went and missed, and then we were able to get on the radio and cancel the flight plan. And then we were able to just do a simple VFR flight over to camp and land there. And fortunately, by this time, it was pretty clear. So then we had basically 2 flights, if I remember correctly. We had to fly a bunch of campers to Buckland, and that was just we've done the Buckland flight so many times. This one was uneventful. We took off, flew to Buckland. I don't even think we needed to file IFR, did we?
No.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
Yeah.
Because it was really clear. So we flew to Buckland, dropped off our campers, and I remember after we dropped off, we like took off and we just kind of like flew up this river. We're like, we need to like just enjoy flying a little bit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so and out there's nothing. It's just a lot of frozen, well, not frozen, but
not in the summer, but
but tundra. And actually the funny thing is, even in July, there was still spots of snow left over from the previous winter.
Yeah.
And just flying along, no obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So that was like probably the easiest flight we had all summer. It was like uneventful, and we were dual, so it was just the easiest flight. Okay, so after we landed back at camp, and there was just I think it was just 2 campers. One lived in Kobuk and the other lived in Shungnak. Now Kobuk and Shungnak are 2 villages right next to each other, and I remember checking the weather, and we saw there was a weather system up there, but we had anticipated that it would like move out of the way by the time we got there. And so we decided to go, and it was really clear and uneventful. I remember we were flying over some wildfires. Like you can look down and see them. See them burning. Yeah,
I don't know, it felt like the whole state was on fire last summer. I mean, so so a lot of the large fires Billy described earlier were south of the Kokrine Hills. They call them hills, but they're really mountains. And then on the other side of the Kokrine Hills, there was actually more fires immediately on the other side of the range there. So
yeah, there was literally one just right there on the edge of the mountain range, I remember. And that one was kind of visually spectacular to look at, just the way the smoke was blowing. And anyway, I have a lot of pictures of that one, just really cool smoke pictures. But anyway, at least the smoke stayed low and it was clear for us. So I remember flying up towards Kobuk, and I had never been to Kobuk before. You had. This was my first time to Kobuk.
Yeah, I've been there quite a bit, but
yeah.
Well, I don't know. At least a couple times each summer.
Sure. So we're flying towards Kobuk, and up ahead we see dark clouds. Remember this?
Yes.
So we kind of look at each other. Do we go around this thing? What do we do with this storm? Because this is weather. This isn't smoke, so this is a different thing. And so this was kind of new.
Well, but you got to remember, I think at the time we might have been at 8,000 or 9,000 feet.
Yeah. We were pretty high, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do remember it was kind of like, it just looked like a wall of darkness, I remember. But as we kind of approached it, we were able to see into the storm. And so it was kind of like we were going to take this one bit at a time. As long as we remain in VMC and we're both comfortable, let's keep poking through. We also had ADS-B weather, and so I was getting reports on my ForeFlight screen that Kobuk was clear. Like, it just said clear, you know? We're like, wow, okay. And it looked like this storm was kind of right around Kobuk. So anyway, we were able to poke through there, and as we went, we did encounter rain, but we were comfortable the whole time. We were able to stay in VMC the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had to descend from, 8,000 or 9,000 feet down to 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
And then we could see 2,000 AGL, and then we could see, through this mountain pass.
Yeah.
And so, like as Billy described, we could turn around at any point, but let's just, let's go a little further. And then once we got, kind of through the pass, there was actually like a row of rain showers. Mm-hmm. And so we just had to fly under that, and then it kind of cleared up a little bit.
Yeah. In fact, it cleared up so much. It was like this angelic light coming down on the village, I remember, because it was like a dark storm, but it was pretty localized. And so we didn't go right through the middle. It was kind of around the edge of it. But when we came out the other end, it was like this angelic light coming, like those light beams that can come through clouds. It was actually really gorgeous.
Yeah, like the Lord was just shining a light right on the village there.
Yeah, and I don't remember if it was right on the village, but it seemed like it. It was just really...
It was within a mile or two.
Within a mile.
We'll
Close
give
enough. Yeah. So anyway, I remember approaching Kobuk. I had not been there, so I remember flying over the village, and, that windsock was just, like, straight. I remember looking at that thing, and it was just like, bing, like totally straight. And so pretty strong direct crosswind right there at Kobuk. And so I remember doing a pass and taking a look at the airstrip and everything. We knew it was going to be a strong crosswind landing. And man, it was. I had to crab that thing pretty strongly to keep the approach stable and in line with the runway. And then as we came down, straightening the nose, that's how I like to do it in the Cherokee anyways. Crab into the wind and then straighten it out. And when it's straight, that wind is wanting to hit the tail and push the nose the other way. And so you tip the ailerons a little bit. Anyway, but we were able to successfully have I was pretty proud of that landing. It was nice, soft, lovely landing there, even though it was a very stiff crosswind.
Yeah, I thought it was well done.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So you would do it again with me in a crosswind?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. So anyway, yeah, I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty much the max I would do for a crosswind was that one. It was pretty strong. But we did it, and I remember when we got out, we dropped off our passenger, the camper, and a local pastor showed up, and he greeted us, and we got to chat with him for a little bit. And it was a much shorter chat than I wanted because we were in a desperate hurry because...
Yeah, that storm was moving in with, heavy rain showers, so
right.
We didn't want to sit there and get drenched. And then we wanted to... Kobuk's kind of in between, there's a large mountain range north of it and then a shorter mountain range south of it. So we kind of wanted to get out of that area.
Yeah, get out of sort of that constrained area.
We didn't want to spend the night, let's put it that way.
We didn't want to spend the night. Although in hindsight, I wouldn't have minded so much because we would have gotten to know that pastor.
That's true. I would like to go back.
He seemed like a really neat guy. And Anyway, I hope I can connect with him. But he'd been there for a decade or something and just serving. So anyway, in Kobuk, if you ever have a chance to go on Google and just look up pictures of Kobuk, it is a stunning place. Unbelievable beauty there. The river there is known for its very clear water, and there's these rounded rocks there, and it's just gorgeous. The mountain range, the trees, all of it. Stunningly beautiful place. Okay, but we had the storm coming up on us. We had strong winds. We needed to leave quickly, so we hopped in the plane and we quickly took off. And Shungnak is just a short hop over. Very, very short. It was kind of like, oh, we're there already, kind of a thing. And so landing at Shungnak was similar. Very strong winds, but did the normal crosswind landing techniques, and we landed fine, dropped off our passenger, and at this point, we made kind of a quick decision, like, do we fly back the way we came? Are you looking up the distance between the two?
Yeah, so it's 8 miles.
8 miles, okay, yeah. In aviation world, 8 miles is like nothing. So, short flight. So I remember making this quick decision, like, do we fly back through the storm the way we came, or do we go around it? And we opted to go around it. And it was kind of like, in like Lord of the Rings, it's like, do we go to Mordor or to Rivendell? Because I remember, like, the proverbial Rivendell, it was like those beams of light coming down, sunny, beautiful, welcoming, golden light. And then you look over at the storm, dark, looming, And so we're kind of like, we're going to go around it this time. So
it was beautiful. And I think I don't remember the exact number, but it might have been another 15 minutes. And we're like, let's take a few more minutes and have a little more relaxing trip.
And we had the fuel and everything. So yeah, good conservative decisions keep us alive. So I remember when we got back to camp, I remember that flight being really relaxing. We just we both just went, relaxed. And we just had it was just smooth. But I remember getting back to camp and we decided to pass camp and fly over the fire site. This was the first time we had done this. Because before it was just plumed in smoke and you couldn't see much. But at this point, some rain had gone through and the fire was largely gone. And so we were able to do this like pass over the fire. And I remember looking down at it and just seeing all the burned trees and there would be like these plumes of fire would shoot up, like a tree would like, what's the word? It would just combust.
Explode?
It looked like it exploded. All of a sudden this fire would and the tree would like disintegrate. It was wild. Like, so there's still some hot things happening down there still. And still some smoke, little spots of smoke burning too. But it was neat to see the fire that had been threatening us for 2 weeks, to see it, the remains of it, so to speak. A 480-acre area, and we were able to just fly over and check that out. Okay, so you and I decided on a couple of lessons that we learned from our wildfire story. Some things we learned from the summer. Number one is rely on the weather cameras.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, don't trust the automated weather reports if there's smoke as one of the factors. So if there's a weather cam there, make sure to take a look at it. I mean, the only disappointing thing is we don't have cellular data out in the middle of nowhere, so we can't check them while we're airborne, but at a minimum we can check them before we take off, and then at some of the villages we can check as well.
Right. Good. So rely on weather cams is lesson 1. Lesson 2, IFR capability is very valuable for remote, long flights. Because of the remoteness, you have limited weather information, and because of the length of the flight, you might fly through more than one weather system. And
and on top of that, I mean, there's long distances between airports. There's nothing.
Yes. So if your destination is not landable,
Yeah.
Your alternate options are extremely limited, like sandbar maybe, And so you have to be very careful about your flight planning.
And I guess we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but this is something else we did, is make sure to just have a large fuel reserve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So.
I mean, you know me, I'm kind of a fuel hog.
Yeah.
I'd rather take off really heavy and have all that extra fuel and then land with all kinds of extra fuel. I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, was there any other parts of the story that you recall before we close out?
No, I think that's everything.
Yeah. All right. So that is our summer of 2022 flying among the wildfire stories. I think we did make good decisions because we're still here. Our families are okay. Everyone's okay. And we also learned a few things. So before we close out, would you let people know about Soaring for Christ? You already talked about it a little bit. But if someone wanted to check out Soaring for Christ, what it is or how to support it, how do we do that?
Yeah, the best way, just go to soaringforchrist.org. And so we've got a few videos there, and so you can learn more about us, and also our emails on there as well. So if you want to drop us an email.
Great. All right, Jeff. Well, I'm hoping that you and I we will create some more flying stories this summer, and I hope that we can sit down again and tell some more of those. And we talked about this recently. You guys went through that huge earthquake back in 2019 or 2018?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would really like to hear from your perspective because you went through that earthquake. You were here for it. And so I need to have you on some other time to tell the earthquake story.
Yeah, definitely. And I was correcting Billy. He was saying there wasn't a lot of deaths. I was saying, well, there might have not been a lot of deaths, but that's because everything was destroyed in that previous earthquake and has been rebuilt.
Yeah, I said that in a previous episode, didn't I?
And it'd be neat to hear from the whole family, kind of the different perspectives.
Yeah. Well, let's do it. Cool. Well, thank you, Jeff, for taking the time to talk about our wildfire flying story. And hopefully we'll have some more episodes with you later on.
Yeah, definitely.
If you have a story that you would like told, please contact me at tysalaska@gmail.com, tysalaska@gmail.com.